The war had been going on for 312 years. Admiral Kexhai of the Zeridian fleet remembered hearing stories about it from his grandfather, who had fought in the early battles. Now Kexhai was old himself, with gray scales covering his face and tired eyes that had seen too much death. The enemy was called the Devourers. They were not like any living thing in the galaxy. They looked like giant crystals that moved through space, but they were much more dangerous than crystals. They ate everything. Planets, stars, space stations, ships, people, everything became food for them. When they finished eating a solar system, they moved to the next one. At first, everyone thought the war would be quick. The Galactic Council had many strong species. The Zeridians were smart and built great machines. The Morvani could read minds and move things with their thoughts. The Cracks were fierce warriors who never backed down from a fight. The Veltar had shields that could stop almost anything. Together, they had millions of ships and billions of soldiers. But the Devourers were different from any enemy they had fought before. Every time the Council found a new weapon that worked, the Devourers learned how to stop it. When the Zeridians built bigger guns, the Devourers grew thicker armor. When the Morvani used their mind powers, the Devourers found ways to block them. When the Cracks charged with their best warriors, the Devourers just absorbed the energy from their weapons and became stronger. The worst part was how fast the Devourers learned. A weapon might work for one battle, maybe two. Then it became useless. Scientists across the galaxy worked day and night to create new technologies, but they could never stay ahead. It was like fighting an enemy that became smarter every time you hit it. Kexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display. Red dots showed where Devourer forces were moving through the galaxy. There were so many red dots that some parts of the map looked completely red. Green dots showed Council forces, but there were fewer of them every year. "Admiral," said his second-in-command, a young Morvani named Telris, "we have received another message from the Council. They want to know if we have heard anything from the humans." Kexhai made a sound that was like a sigh. The humans. Everyone kept talking about the humans. They were a new species that had been discovered 50 years ago in a small solar system near the edge of the galaxy. When the Council first made contact, the humans seemed friendly enough. They were curious about other species and asked many questions about the galaxy. But when the Council asked for help with the war, the humans always said the same thing. They needed more time to study the situation. They wanted to understand the enemy better before they could help. Every year, the Council sent messages asking for human ships and soldiers. Every year, the humans said they were not ready yet. Many Council members had stopped believing the humans would ever help. Some thought the humans were cowards who were afraid to fight. Others believed the humans were too weak to make a difference anyway. They only had one star system and had never fought in a real war. Kexhai was not sure what to think about the humans. He had met a few human diplomats over the years. They seemed smart and asked good questions. But they were also very quiet about their own abilities. When asked about their military strength, they just said they were working on it. When asked about their technology, they said it was developing nicely. They never gave straight answers. "Sir," Telris said, interrupting his thoughts, "long-range sensors are picking up movement in the Altair system. It looks like a large Devourer force." Kexhai turned to look at the display. The Altair system was important because it had 3 inhabited planets with billions of people. If the Devourers reached those planets, all those people would die. The Council had to defend it. "How many ships do we have in that area?" Kexhai asked. "About 800 Council ships, sir. Mixed fleet with vessels from 6 different species." "And the Devourers?" "Our scouts count at least 2,000 of their larger forms plus support swarms. Maybe 3,000 total." The numbers were bad, but not impossible. The Council had won battles with worse odds before, though it always cost many lives. Kexhai began giving orders to move more ships to the Altair system. As he worked, he thought about all the battles he had fought in this long war. The Battle of Nexus 7, where they had held off the Devourers for 6 months before finally retreating. The defense of Corix Prime, where half his fleet was destroyed but they saved the planet. The siege of the Barrier Worlds, where they fought for 2 years in deep space with no rest. Every battle was hard. Every victory came with terrible losses. And still the Devourers kept coming. They never seemed to get tired. They never ran out of ships. Every year they controlled more of the galaxy, and every year the Council controlled less. Sometimes Kexhai wondered if they were fighting a war they could not win. The Devourers had advantages that seemed impossible to overcome. They could turn any material into energy for themselves. They could adapt to new weapons faster than anyone could create them. They worked together perfectly, like they all shared the same mind. But the Council could not give up. Behind them were thousands of worlds with trillions of living beings. Families, children, entire civilizations that would be destroyed if the Devourers won. So they kept fighting even when it seemed hopeless. "Admiral," Telra said, "we are ready to jump to the Altair system." "Good, send word to all ships. We leave in 10 minutes. As his fleet prepared to jump through hyperspace, HFY took one last look at the intelligence reports about humans. The files were thin. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level, developing. Military strength unknown. Willingness to help, unclear. For 50 years, while the galaxy burned, the humans had stayed in their one-star system. They said they were studying and preparing, but what could take 50 years to prepare for? The war was happening now. People were dying now. How much studying did they need to do? HFY had heard some council members joke that the humans were probably building the biggest library in the galaxy, with all the studying they claimed to be doing. Others said the humans were just scared and making excuses. A few believed the humans had some secret plan, but after 50 years with no action, even those believers were starting to doubt. "Jump in 5 minutes, sir," reported his navigation officer. HFY nodded and turned back to the tactical display. In a few hours he would be fighting the Devourers again. Some of his ships would be destroyed. Some of his people would die, but they would fight anyway because that was all they could do. Maybe someday the humans would finally finish their studying and join the war. Maybe their help would make a difference. Or maybe they would keep making excuses until the Devourers reached their star system too. But HFY could not wait for maybe. He had a battle to fight and people to protect. As his fleet jumped into hyperspace toward the Altair system, he wondered if this would be just another long, hard battle in an endless war, or if something might finally change. He had no idea that in just a few hours, everything would change in ways he could never imagine. Admiral Vextar had been fighting the Devourers for 60 years. His blue-scaled hands moved quickly over the controls of his command ship as enemy forces moved toward the Altair system. 3 planets full of people depended on his fleet to protect them. "Enemy formation is holding steady," reported his tactical officer, a Krax warrior named Grex. 2,000 large Devourers, plus maybe 1,000 smaller ones. Vextar studied the display. The Devourers looked like moving mountains made of dark crystal. Some were as big as cities, others as large as mountains. They moved through space without any ships, using some kind of natural ability that no one understood. When they got close to targets, they would extend crystal arms to grab and absorb everything they touched. "Our defensive line is ready, sir," said Commander Yilnara, a Morvani whose mind-reading abilities helped coordinate the fleet. 800 ships from 6 species. We have good positions around the 3 planets. It was a strong defensive setup, but Vexitar had fought enough battles to know it might not be enough. The Devourers always found ways to break through defenses that should have stopped them. They adapted too quickly, learned too fast. "Sir," called out Ensign Coda from the communications station. "I'm getting a strange reading on long-range sensors. Something is approaching the system, but I can't identify what it is." Vextar frowned. "Devourer reinforcements?" "No, sir, the signature is completely different. I've never seen anything like it." On the main screen, a small dot appeared at the edge of the sensor range. As they watched, space around the dot began to ripple like water. The ripples grew larger and brighter until suddenly a ship appeared out of nowhere. The ship was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was smooth and dark, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. No sharp edges, no visible weapons, no external structures at all. It looked more like a piece of art than a warship. "What is that?" Grex demanded, his warrior instincts making him reach for his weapons. Before anyone could answer, the unknown ship sent a communication signal. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and clear, speaking perfect galactic standard with a slight accent no one recognized. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus. Admiral Vextar, we need to talk." The bridge went completely silent. Vextar felt his heart skip a beat. Human. After 50 years of excuses and delays, a human ship had finally appeared. But just one ship? In the middle of a major battle? "Captain Chen," Vextar replied, trying to keep his voice steady. This is Admiral Vexitar of the Zeridian Third Fleet. We are about to engage a large devourer force. If you wish to help, we welcome any assistance, but one ship cannot. Admiral, Chen interrupted politely. We've been watching this system for several hours. We have detailed scans of the enemy force and your defensive positions. We're uploading tactical data to your computers now. Suddenly, every screen on Vextar's bridge lit up with information. Detailed maps of devourer movements, weak points in their formations, predicted attack patterns, energy signatures, behavioral analysis, data that would have taken the Council's best scientists months to gather. How did you get all this? Yilnara asked, her mental abilities sensing something strange about the human ship. We've been studying the Devourers for a long time, Chen replied. Much longer than 50 years from our perspective. We know how they think, how they move, how they adapt. We know their weaknesses. Vexitar stared at the tactical data flooding his screens. It was incredibly detailed and accurate. The humans had somehow learned more about the Devourers in a few hours than the Council had discovered in centuries of fighting. Captain Chen, he said slowly, this information is remarkable, but we still have 2,000 Devourers heading for 3 inhabited planets. How can one ship— Admiral, Chen said, and for the first time her voice carried a hint of amusement. The Prometheus is not here to fight. We're here to coordinate. The preliminary observation phase is complete. The actual human fleet will arrive shortly. Preliminary phase? Grex growled. What preliminary phase? This is your first appearance in the war. From your perspective, yes, Chen agreed. Things look different from ours. Before anyone could ask what that meant, Ensign Kota called out in amazement. Sir, massive energy readings throughout the system. Multiple ships appearing. The main screen changed to show the space around them. Ripples appeared everywhere. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of points where space itself seemed to bend and twist. Ships began appearing out of nowhere, materializing from the strange ripples like they were stepping through invisible doors. Vextar had seen many fleets in his long career, but nothing like this. The human ships were all similar to the Prometheus, smooth, dark, and graceful, but there were so many of them. Thousands upon thousands appearing in perfect formations that surrounded the entire Altair system. By the ancient stars, Yilnara whispered. Where did they all come from? The human ships moved with incredible precision. No communication delays, no formation adjustments, no confusion. They moved like they were all controlled by a single mind, but somehow more perfect than even the Devourer's coordination. Captain Chen, Vextar said, his voice barely steady. How many ships do you have? For this operation? About 12,000 combat vessels plus support ships. We brought more than we expect to need, but it's better to be prepared. 12,000 ships. The Council had been fighting for 3 centuries and had never assembled a fleet that large. And the humans called this more than they needed for a battle the Council considered desperate. Admiral, Chen continued, we recommend your forces pull back to a safe distance. We're about to begin active engagement protocols and you don't want to be caught in the area of effect. Area of effect? Vextar asked. Our weapons are comprehensive. They affect large areas of space-time. Your ships could be damaged even if they're not directly targeted. Vextar looked at his officers. They all wore the same expression of shock and confusion. In less than 10 minutes, everything about this battle had changed. The humans weren't just offering to help. They were taking over the entire operation. Sir, Grex said quietly, should we trust them? It was a good question. The humans had been mysterious for 50 years. Now they appeared with a massive fleet using technology that seemed impossible, but they were offering to fight the Devourers, and they clearly knew more about the enemy than anyone else. All ships, Vextar announced on the fleet channel, pull back to minimum safe distance. We're going to see what the humans can do. As the Council fleet moved away from the planets, Vextar watched the human ships position themselves between the Devourers and the inhabited worlds. The enemy force was still approaching, still confident, still looking unstoppable. But something had changed in the space around Altair. The humans weren't just here with ships and weapons. They had brought something else, a feeling that the impossible was about to happen. Admiral, Chen's voice came through the speakers one more time. Thank you for your patience. We know 50 years seemed like a long time to wait. We're ready to begin now. You might want to record this for the historical archives. Vextar activated the recording systems without really thinking about it. On the main screen, The human fleet began to spread out in patterns that made no sense according to any known tactical doctrine. The Devourers were still coming, still confident in their power. They had never lost a major battle. They had consumed star systems and defeated every enemy they had ever faced. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The battle began in a way that made no sense. Admiral Vextar watched from his command ship as the human fleet spread out in strange patterns around the Devourer force. The humans didn't form the defensive lines or attack formations that every military academy in the galaxy taught. Instead, their ships moved to positions that seemed random, scattered throughout the space around the enemy. "What are they doing?" Grex asked, his Crack's warrior instincts confused by tactics he couldn't understand. "I don't know," Vextar admitted. On his screens, the Devourers continued their steady approach toward the 3 planets. 2,000 crystal entities, each one larger than a city, moving with the confidence of predators who had never been defeated. Then the impossible started happening. The first thing Vextar noticed was that some of the human ships began to flicker. Not like damaged equipment or failing power systems, but like they were becoming less real. One moment a ship was solid and clear on sensors. The next moment it was faint and ghostly, then solid again. "Sensor malfunction?" suggested Ensign Coda. "No," Yilnara said, her Morvani mental abilities picking up something strange. "The ships are really doing that. They're existing in multiple states at the same time." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the human ships opened fire. But their weapons were nothing like the energy beams, missiles, or particle cannons that filled every other military arsenal in the galaxy. The human weapons were impossible. Beams of light shot out from human ships and hit Devourer formations that were behind them. Weapons fired in one direction but struck targets in completely different directions. Some shots seemed to hit their targets before they were fired, with explosions appearing on Devourer entities moments before the weapons that caused them became visible. "How are they shooting backwards?" Grex demanded. "I think," Yilnara said slowly, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "They're shooting through time itself. The Devourers, who had adapted to every weapon in 3 centuries of war, found themselves being attacked by forces that ignored the basic rules of reality. Their crystal forms, which could absorb and redirect any kind of energy, began to crack and shatter under impacts from weapons that shouldn't exist. But the humans were just getting started. Some human ships began to split apart, not breaking from damage but deliberately dividing into multiple copies of themselves. A single ship would become 2 identical ships, then 4, then 8. Each copy was completely real and fully functional, attacking from different angles simultaneously. Other human ships simply disappeared from one location and appeared in another, with no travel time between. They would vanish from the edge of the battle and instantly materialize in the middle of Devourer formations, firing at point-blank range before disappearing again. "Admiral," Coda called out, his voice shaking, "I'm reading impossible energy signatures from the human fleet. Their ships they're in multiple places at the same time." Vextar stared at his screens in amazement. The tactical display showed human ships existing in several locations simultaneously, like they were fighting the battle from different dimensions all at once. Each version of each ship was real enough to fire weapons and cause damage, but they all seemed connected somehow. The Devourers, for the first time in recorded history, began to show signs of confusion. Their perfect coordination started to break down as they tried to respond to attacks that came from impossible angles and directions. They extended their crystal arms to absorb energy from human weapons, but the energy wasn't there to absorb. The weapons were hitting them from the past or from parallel realities or from dimensions that didn't follow normal physics. "Captain Chen," Vextar called out on the communication channel. "What kind of weapons are those?" "Multi-dimensional warfare systems," Chen replied calmly, as if she was discussing the weather. "We discovered that the Devourers exist only in normal spacetime. They can't adapt to attacks from other dimensions or different temporal states." "Other dimensions? Time travel? How is that possible?" "When you have enough time to work on a problem, almost anything becomes possible, Admiral." On the main screen, the battle was becoming a slaughter. The Devourers, who had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, were being systematically destroyed. Human ships attacked from everywhere and nowhere, using weapons that broke every known law of physics. But the most amazing thing was how organized it all looked. Despite the chaos of impossible attacks and reality-bending weapons, the human fleet moved with perfect coordination. Every ship knew exactly where to be and when to attack. There were no wasted shots, no friendly fire, no confusion. How are they coordinating all this? Yilnara asked. Even with our best mental link networks, this level of coordination should be impossible. We fight as one mind, Chen explained. Every human ship is connected through quantum entanglement networks. We share thoughts, reactions, and decisions instantly across any distance. The Devourers tried to retreat. For the first time in the war, they actually turned away from a battle and tried to escape. But the humans had anticipated this. Human ships appeared in the path of every retreat route, cutting off all escape. The Devourers were trapped in a cage made of impossible technology and physics that didn't make sense. Admiral, Chen's voice came through the speakers. We're beginning Phase 2 of the engagement. You might want to move your ships back a bit further. Phase 2? Vextar asked. What was Phase 1? Testing our targeting systems and confirming Devourer response patterns. Phase 2 is actual combat. Vextar looked at his tactical display. In 15 minutes of testing, the humans had already destroyed nearly a quarter of the Devourer force. If that was just testing, what would actual combat look like? He found out quickly. The human ships began charging weapons that registered on sensors as containing more energy than most stars. Space around the Devourer force started to bend and twist as the humans prepared to fire something that affected reality itself. All ships pull back to maximum distance, Vextar ordered. Emergency retreat now! As the Council fleet fled to safe range, the humans opened fire with their real weapons. Beams of concentrated spacetime struck the Devourers, and the crystal entities didn't just explode or break apart. They ceased to exist. The space where they had been became smooth and empty, as if they had never been there at all. They're not destroying them, Yilnara whispered in awe. They're erasing them from reality. In the space of 30 minutes, the human fleet had turned a desperate defensive battle into a complete victory. 2,000 Devourers, enough to destroy entire star systems, had been eliminated without causing any damage to the planets they had come to consume. Captain Chen, Vextar said when he could finally speak, that was incredible. How did you develop such technology? Practice, Admiral. Lots and lots of practice. We've fought this battle many times before in many different ways. We know every possible move the Devourers can make, and we have counters for all of them. But how? This was your first real battle with them. From your perspective, yes. From ours, it's complicated. Time works differently when you know how to use it properly. Vextar looked at the empty space where the Devourer force had been. 30 minutes ago, he had been preparing for another long, costly battle in an endless war. Now the enemy was gone, erased so completely that even their debris had vanished. What happens now? He asked. Now we move to the next system where Devourers are attacking, Chen replied. We have a list of every Devourer force in the galaxy. We'll visit them all today. Today? All of them? The preliminary phase took 50 years, Admiral. The active phase should only take a few hours. As the human fleet began to disappear through their impossible space ripples, heading for the next battle, Vextar realized that everything was about to change. The war that had defined galactic civilization for 3 centuries was ending, and humanity had just announced itself as the most powerful force in the galaxy. Admiral Vextar had seen the impossible happen once. He was not prepared to see it happen again and again and again. After the battle at Altair, he had followed the human fleet to the next system under Devourer attack. Then the next one, then the next. Each time the same pattern repeated. Human ships would appear from nowhere, engage the Devourers with impossible weapons, and completely eliminate them in minutes. By the 4th battle, Vextar stopped trying to understand the technology. By the 8th battle, he stopped being amazed by the weapons. By the 12th battle, he realized he was watching something that would change everything about how the galaxy worked. Admiral, Commander Yilnara said from her station, I'm getting reports from across the galaxy. Human fleets are engaging Devourer forces in over 300 systems simultaneously. 300 systems. The humans weren't just fighting one battle at a time. They were fighting everywhere at once across the entire galaxy, all coordinated perfectly. How many ships do they have? Grex asked. I've stopped counting, Vextar admitted. Every time I think I've seen their whole fleet, more ships appear. On the main screen, the latest Devourer force was being systematically erased from existence. These Devourers had been besieging a Morvani colony world for 6 months, slowly grinding down the defenders. The human fleet eliminated them in 18 minutes. Captain Chen, Vextar called out on the communication channel. I need to understand what's happening. You say you've been preparing for 50 years? But the technology you're using seems impossible even with 50 years of development. Admiral, Chen replied. Would you like to speak privately? I think it's time for some explanations. A few minutes later, Captain Chen appeared on Vextar's bridge. She was human, obviously, but smaller than he had expected. Humans were generally shorter than most galactic species, but Chen looked almost fragile compared to the weapons of impossible destruction her fleet commanded. She had dark hair, calm brown eyes, and wore a simple uniform that showed no rank or decorations. When she smiled, it was the expression of someone who knew secrets that would amaze and terrify everyone around her. 50 years ago, Chen began. When the Galactic Council first asked humanity for help, we said we needed time to study the situation. That was true, but not in the way you understood it. What do you mean? Vextar asked. Admiral, what's the biggest limitation in any research project? Resources? Technology? Time, Chen said. There's never enough time to solve complex problems properly. But what if you could have all the time you needed? Chen touched a small device on her wrist and suddenly the bridge around them slowed down. Yelnara was turning to look at Chen, but her movement was so slow that Vextar could see individual muscle movements. Grex was reaching for his weapon, but his hand moved like it was underwater. Time dilation field, Chen explained casually. Right now we're experiencing time at a rate about 1,000 times faster than normal. To your crew, this conversation will last about 1 second. To us, we can talk for hours. Vextar felt his mind struggling to process this. You can control time? We can manipulate our relationship to time, yes. When we said we needed 50 years to prepare, we meant 50 years of real time. But inside accelerated time fields, we experienced much longer periods. Thousands of years, actually. Thousands of years? Vextar stared at her. You've been researching for thousands of years. Researching, developing, planning, and most importantly, practicing. Admiral, we didn't just study the Devourers for 50 years. We fought them for thousands of years. In simulation, in controlled tests, in every possible scenario we could imagine. Chen gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed star charts, but not like any Vextar had seen before. These charts showed time as well as space, with the movements of Devourers tracked across both dimensions. We mapped every Devourer in the galaxy. Chen continued. We studied their behavior patterns, their adaptation methods, their reproduction cycles. We fought this war 1,000,000 times in accelerated simulation. We tried every possible strategy, every weapon system, every tactical approach. But how did you develop weapons that break the laws of physics? When you have thousands of years to work on physics, you discover that the laws aren't as fixed as everyone thinks. Reality has rules, but the rules have exceptions. The exceptions have loopholes, and the loopholes can be exploited if you're clever enough and patient enough. Vextar looked at the tactical displays showing human fleets across the galaxy. So when you appeared today, we weren't coming to fight the Devourers, Admiral. We were coming to implement a solution we perfected centuries ago. From our perspective, this isn't a war anymore. It's a cleanup operation. But why wait 50 years? If you could have ended this war long ago, Chen's expression became more serious. Because we needed to be absolutely certain. The weapons we're using today don't just destroy the Devourers. They could destroy anything. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. We spent most of our research time making sure we could target only the Devourers and nothing else. She touched her device again, and normal time resumed around them. Yelnara finished her turn. Grex completed his reach for his weapon, and the sounds of the bridge returned to normal speed. Also, Chen added in normal time. We needed to observe the war from the outside to understand all the factors involved. We had to be sure that eliminating the Devourers wouldn't cause other problems for galactic civilization. What do you mean? Yelnara asked, having caught the end of the conversation. The Devourers have been affecting galactic development for 3 centuries, Chen explained. They've shaped how your species work together, how your technology developed, how your societies are organized. Removing them suddenly could have caused chaos. We needed to plan for the aftermath as carefully as we planned for the war itself. Grex frowned. So you let us fight and die for 3 centuries while you made plans? We let you survive for 3 centuries while we developed the power to end the threat permanently, Chen corrected gently. If we had acted too soon with imperfect solutions, The Devourers might have adapted to our weapons the way they adapted to yours. Then no one could have stopped them. Admiral Vextar stared at Captain Chen, trying to process everything she had told him. The humans hadn't just been hiding or making excuses for 50 years. They had been living through thousands of years of accelerated time, becoming something far beyond what anyone in the galaxy had imagined possible. "Captain," he said finally, "what happens now? The war is ending, but what comes next?" Chen smiled again, that same calm expression of someone who knew secrets. "Now comes the interesting part, Admiral. The Devourers were the biggest threat to galactic civilization, but they weren't the only problem. There are other things out there in the dark between galaxies, things that have been waiting for the right time to move. Other threats? The Devourers were like a wall protecting this galaxy from much worse things. With the wall gone, those other things will start moving toward inhabited space. They should arrive in about 50 years. Vextar felt his heart sink. Another war? No, Chen said, and her smile became wider. A much more interesting challenge. And this time humanity won't need 50 years to prepare. We've been working on solutions for those other threats for about 2,000 years now. As Captain Chen disappeared back to her ship, Vextar realized that the end of the Devourer War wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning of a galaxy where humanity had announced itself as the species that thought in thousands of years and solved impossible problems. And somehow, that was both the most comforting and most terrifying thought he had ever had. The war ended at exactly 1547 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday. Admiral Vexatar was in the Nexus system, watching human ships eliminate the last major Devourer stronghold, when every communication channel in the galaxy began broadcasting the same message in hundreds of languages. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet. All Devourer forces have been eliminated. The war is over. Repeat, the war is over. 5 hours and 7 minutes. That was how long it had taken humanity to end a war that had raged for 3 centuries. Vextar sat in his command chair, staring at empty space where a Devourer fleet had existed moments before. Around him, his bridge crew was silent. After fighting for so long, none of them seemed to know how to react to victory. "Sir," Ensign Coda said quietly, "I'm receiving thousands of messages from across the galaxy. Every system, every species, every government. They all want to know the same thing. What's that? What happens now?" It was a good question. The Galactic Council had been organized around fighting the Devourers. Every law, every treaty, every military alliance had been designed for the war effort. Now that the war was over, no one knew what came next. "Admiral," Captain Chen's voice came through the speakers. "Would you like to accompany us back to Sol System? I think it's time for humanity to have some formal conversations with the Galactic Council." An hour later, Vextar found himself aboard a human ship for the first time. The interior was as strange as the exterior. Smooth walls that seemed to glow with their own light, corridors that curved in ways that shouldn't have been possible, and technology that felt more like art than engineering. Captain Chen led him to what she called the observation deck. It was a large room with walls made entirely of some transparent material that showed the space outside. But it wasn't just a window somehow. The view could zoom in on distant objects, show multiple perspectives at once, and display information about everything they were looking at. "Impressive ship," Vextar said. "Thank you. This design is about 400 years old from our perspective. We've built much more advanced vessels, but the Prometheus is reliable and comfortable for long missions." 400 years old. Vextar had to remind himself that when humans talked about time, they meant something different than everyone else. "Captain," he said, "I need to ask something that's been bothering me. Your fleet today, how many ships was that, really?" Chen thought for a moment. "About 40,000 vessels of various sizes, plus support systems." 40,000? Vextar felt his legs get weak. The largest fleet in galactic history had maybe 2,000 ships. "Different design philosophy," Chen explained. "Most species build ships to be as large and powerful as possible. We prefer to build many smaller ships that work together perfectly. Also, our manufacturing capabilities are somewhat advanced." The ship entered hyperspace, but not like any hyperspace Vextar had experienced before. Instead of the violent shaking and disorientation that came with normal faster-than-light travel, this felt like drifting on a calm ocean. Through the transparent walls, he could see stars streaming past in patterns that looked almost like music. "This is a pleasant way to travel," he said. We've had time to refine the technology. Our hyperspace drives don't fight against the natural structure of space-time. They work with it. As they traveled toward Sol System, Chen showed Vextar displays of what was happening across the galaxy. Every inhabited system was celebrating. Refugees who had been living in temporary shelters for decades were preparing to return home. Worlds that had been evacuated were being resettled. Children who had never known peace were seeing it for the first time. But there was also confusion and fear. Humanity had revealed capabilities that no one had imagined possible. Government leaders across the galaxy were asking the same questions. What did humanity want? What were their intentions? Were they conquerors who had eliminated the Devourers to clear the way for their own expansion? People are afraid of us, Chen observed, reading the diplomatic messages that were flooding galactic communication networks. Can you blame them? Vextar asked. In 5 hours, you demonstrated technology that makes everyone else look primitive. Your species just became the most powerful force in the galaxy, by a margin that's impossible to measure. That wasn't our goal, Chen said. We just wanted to solve the Devourer problem. But now that the problem is solved, what do you want? Chen was quiet for a long time, looking out at the flowing stars. Do you know what humans were like before we encountered the galaxy, Admiral? Tell me. We were small, not physically, but in our thinking. We worried about things like territory, resources, political power. We fought wars over pieces of land or access to materials. Our biggest concerns were local, planetary problems. She gestured at the display showing the galaxy. Then we learned about the Devourers. Suddenly, we were facing a threat that could destroy everything we had ever known. It changed us. We stopped thinking like a planetary species and started thinking like a galactic one. Is that why you spent 50 years preparing instead of fighting immediately? Partly, but also because we realized something important. The galaxy is full of young species making the same mistakes we used to make, fighting over small things, thinking in short terms, solving immediate problems without considering long-term consequences. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Vextar saw Sol System for the first time. It looked normal. One yellow star, several planets, some asteroid belts. No massive space stations, no orbital shipyards, no obvious signs of the incredible technology he had seen in battle. Where are your military bases? He asked. We don't really have military bases the way you're thinking of them, Chen replied. Most of our infrastructure exists in accelerated time bubbles. From the outside, they look like small research stations. From the inside, they're vast complexes where we've been working for thousands of years. As they approached Earth, Chen continued explaining humanity's perspective. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Admiral. We want to help it grow up. There are threats coming that make the Devourers look like a minor inconvenience. The galaxy needs to be ready. What kind of threats? Things from outside our galaxy. Entities that consume entire galactic clusters. Forces that can manipulate the structure of reality itself. The Devourers were just the first wave, sent ahead to weaken our galaxy's defenses. Vextar stared at her. How do you know this? Because we've been looking beyond our galaxy for a very long time. When you can control time and space the way we can, you develop very good sensors. We've been watching those other threats gather for about 1,000 years now. They entered Earth's atmosphere, and Vextar saw a world that looked peaceful and green, cities that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape, with no sharp edges or industrial scars, millions of humans going about their daily lives, most of them probably unaware that their species had just won the most important war in galactic history. So what happens now? Vextar asked. Now we help the galaxy prepare for what's coming, Chen said. We share some of our technology, help other species develop their capabilities, and work together to build defenses against threats that make the Devourers look harmless. And if species don't want to cooperate? Chen smiled. That same calm expression that had both comforted and terrified Vextar all day. Admiral, we've spent thousands of years studying galactic politics and psychology. We know exactly how to convince people to cooperate, even when they don't think they want to. As their ship landed at what Chen called the diplomatic complex, a beautiful building that seemed to be made of crystal and light, Vextar realized that the galaxy had just entered a completely new era. The age of humanity had begun. Not through conquest or domination, but through the simple fact that one species had learned to think in terms of thousands of years and solve problems that everyone else considered impossible. The war with the Devourers was over. But as Captain Chen had said, that was just the beginning. The real test of galactic civilization was still to come, and somehow, knowing that humanity was preparing for it made Vexter feel more hopeful about the future than he had felt in centuries, even if he still didn't fully understand how they had won a 3-century war in just 5 hours.